All right. Well, it is 1 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm sure we'll probably have a few more people join us along the way, but welcome to today's Glad You Asked. Teresa is out in the field. She's working today, so we talked about our topics beforehand. So I'm
Okay.
going to holding down the fort. All right. Hey, Carrie and Mike. I see you guys floating on your deck or something. Good to see you. Glad y'all joined. Hey, Jen. All right. So today's topics, you probably saw the text. We are going to be talking about if you're thinking about starting a firm or if you are planning to start one, whether it's for compensation only or you actually want to operate in your own team or firm name. So we're going to talk about what you need to know and what you need to do if you're planning on starting a firm. The second thing is we need to discuss advertising. There have been quite a few questions about advertising. And remember, you're responsible for complying not just with the commission advertising rules, but you have to comply with state, with federal, with your MLS board. So there's a ton of advertising requirements. And so we're going to review some of those today and make sure that you all are compliant so you can stay out of real estate jail is what we call it, right? Even though we know there's no such thing. And then finally, the last topic for today is we have been having several questions about agents financing seller repairs. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about, is it a good idea? We're going to talk about what you should do if you're considering it. And so a lot of things to talk about. And then we're also going to mention what our recommendation is concerning that last one. A couple of announcements before we get started. Remember, Red Day is next week. So if you haven't already, make sure you sign up to volunteer and give back on that day that we shut the office down. There are several volunteer opportunities, both in the Hillsborough area and in Burlington. They're even doing Habitat for Humanity. Yay! If you've ever done that, that is so fun. But we've got plenty of opportunities to sign up and to get involved in volunteering for Red Day. So make sure you know that's this time next week, next Thursday. And let's see, any other reminders? A big one. CE. It is CE season. If you have not already taken your CE, make sure you do so by May 31st. I know that date probably sounds a little different to you, but Keller Williams has decided to have our date for CE in May so that everyone will meet that June 10th requirement. And so make sure if you haven't already, you need your Gen Up or BIC Up if you're BIC eligible, and you need an elective. All right. And so those are all of the reminders. And so we're going to get started in our first topic. So do any of you all already have like a separate firm, your own firm, maybe for compensation, or are you thinking about starting one? No? Anyone?
I am. I'm thinking about it and I want to help somebody else do it.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
I've been thinking about it, but I don't have one currently.
Okay. And so a couple of things that we wanted to bring up and help you to consider or prepare if you are thinking about having your own firm is the why. Why are you setting up your own separate entity? Because depending on the why will determine what you need to actually do. Okay. And so there's a couple of reasons why. So make sure you can answer this question. If you're wanting to do it for compensation only, and so that's a lot of reasons why people will set up a separate firm so that you can run all the finances, the compensation through your firm. So if you're going to do it that way, then you still have to have a firm license and you still need to set up your entity appropriately with North Carolina. So whether you're going to do an LLC or if you're going to do a corporation, whatever type of firm that you're going to do, make sure you properly set it up, get your articles of incorporation if you're doing LLC with the Secretary of State, and establish a full firm with the state first. And then once you've done that, then you need to apply for a firm license with the Real Estate Commission. Okay, so you're going to have a separate firm license. And then once all of those, all that information is in place, then you need to submit to KW Central, to the broker in charge email, your firm license information and your tax ID or EIN number. Once we have those two things, then we can begin to actually send the compensation to your firm instead of to you as an individual agent. So for those agents who are interested in creating a firm just for compensation only, a lot of people do it for tax purposes. There's a lot of good reasons to do it or not to do it, depending on how good you are with your management and your paperwork and such. Okay. Now, if you are thinking about starting a firm because you actually want to advertise in a specific team name, or you want to do it for branding purposes, you can still create a firm and you can create one that allows advertising, but you're going to handle that very differently. Other than, you still have to do the same entity creation, register with the Secretary of State. You still have to register it with the Real Estate Commission, but when you do, instead of it being compensation only, you're going to indicate that it's going to be a DBA. So make sure when you're setting up your firm license with the commission that you indicate that you're going to do business as this new firm name. And when you advertise, and you advertise with the new firm, let's say you're starting up Real Estate Dreamers or something, and you want to make that your LLC, when you do advertise under your new firm, you have to be sure for E&O purposes, if you still want your transactions to be covered, to leave off the LLC. Okay. And so that's something, there's a lot to consider if you're going to start and actually advertise in your new firm name. So if it's compensation only, it's a little bit simpler. We just need the firm license number and your EIN number. If you're going to advertise, we have to make sure you understand how to properly advertise, because KW still needs to be a part of that advertising, along with your new firm name, minus the entity, the LLC or the corporation, to make sure you're covered by E&O insurance. Okay, so there's, just some answers to some questions, because there's quite a few people that are thinking about starting up and creating your own firm license, and that's fine. Just make sure you do it the right way. Any questions? Okay, I see two hands. Heather.
So with regards to the first one for compensation only, is there any validity or truth to the fact that doing so will help protect you from piercing the veil on personal assets should you ever get sued?
So that's a good question. You want to probably talk to an attorney to make sure, but I would tell you that I think you have more protection from the piercing the veil for the firm that you are actually advertising from. So the compensation only, you're not advertising under that entity. It exists only to flow money through it. So that one really doesn't have any kind of liability protection, so to speak, in that sense. So I would say no, but definitely talk to an attorney to make sure that you get correct legal advice.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. Jen.
My question is, with getting a firm license, and I apologize if you said this and I missed it, do you have to be a broker in charge?
Very good question. So you do have to be or have a broker in charge. When it comes to your pass-through firm, you have to be the broker in charge if it's compensation only, okay? Because that one, you can't have any other agents affiliated with it. If it's going to be a firm where you're going to actually operate in that firm name, you have to have a broker in charge if you're not going to be that broker in charge yourself. Okay. And firms also need something called a QB, or qualifying broker. You can be both the QB and the broker in charge, or you can have two separate people if you are doing the full firm with the advertising. Good questions. Very good questions. Anyone else have a question? All right. And so from our side here, we want to make sure that you knew what to do and the steps you need to take and the order of those steps so that if you do want to run a firm for compensation only, you can make sure that you can be paid from KW to your firm or your entity. And again, establish everything with the state first, get a firm license number, and submit your tax ID number. All right. And then if you are going to advertise in your own branding, your own name, then make sure that you understand all of those rules for advertising. And that's where we are going next. So are there any other questions about setting up your firm before we dive into a really deep review on advertising? I don't see any hands. No? Okay. All right. So when it comes to advertising, if you have reviewed the policies and procedures, you'll see we have a short blurb that says that you're responsible for making sure that you're complying with all of the state, the local, the NCREC, every MLS that you're a member of, all of their rules and regulations. But that's a pretty general and somewhat vague statement. So we want to give you a deeper dive. If you look in the policies procedures, at the very bottom, we have a separate Exhibit A that is just dedicated to advertising. And so I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to take a look at that Exhibit A. And if you have any questions, feel free to stop me along the way. But we are going to do a deep dive review on advertising. Obviously, the reason why certainly is that there have been a lot of questions that have been coming up about advertising, and we want to get those questions answered for you and keep you protected and out of trouble. All right, so just give me a second to share my screen with you. All right, can everybody see this? Exhibit A, advertising. Yep, okay, I see heads nodding, great. All right, so we're just gonna go through this. I'm gonna go fairly quickly because we of course have a time limit here, but feel free to raise your hands or unmute. I may not be able to see everyone since I have this different view going, and ask a question along the way if you like. All right, so first thing under advertising, entry into the MLSs. Some of you all are members of just one MLS, but some of you are members of multiple MLSs. And so a question that came up was, do we have to enter our listing into all of them if we're members of multiple MLSs? And so the answer to that is you do not have to. You do have to follow the rules of your MLS. And so we kind of took that to a pretty specific list of MLS requirements as far as where you have to enter them, okay? And so for Alamance MLS requires the properties that are in Alamance County to be entered into that MLS only. So if you're listing a property in a different county and you're part of AMLS, you don't have to enter that property in AMLS, only if the property is located in Alamance County. They're the only MLS that has the one county restriction, okay? Triad has 10 required counties. So if you're a member of Triad MLS and you list a property in Davidson, Davie, Forsyth, Guilford, Randolph, Rockingham, Stokes, Surrey, Wilkes, Yatkins, any of those counties, then you have to enter that into the Triad MLS, okay? If you list a property somewhere other than those 10 required counties, you don't have to list it in Triad if you're a member of some other MLS to list it in, okay? Triangle has 16 required counties, including Alamance. And so if you're a member of both Alamance and Triangle and you have a property in Alamance, you do have to list in both of those MLSs, okay? So Alamance is the one that overlaps in the case of Triangle. And there are 16: Caswell, Chatham, Durham, Franklin, Granville, Halifax, Harnett, Johnston, Lee, Nash, Orange, Person, Vance, Wake, and Warren. So a lot of counties. But again, if you're listing something outside of those required counties, you don't have to actually list it in TMLS if you are a member of another MLS, okay? And then Canopy and NC Regional are two new MLSs that our firm has recently joined. And they are, or we're in the process of joining these. And so at this point, we're asking you to contact them for specifically required counties until we get the full information available that we can add into our update here. Heather.
So this is neat that you're bringing this up. So for Canopy, do we have to wait until the Market Center has joined before we can join it?
You do, unless you have a separate firm license already and your other firm license has joined. But I believe the joining is complete now for Canopy. And so if you're interested in joining Canopy, send a email to the BIC, it's brokerincharge832@gmail.com, and let us know that you're interested in joining Canopy, because we have completed the joining for that one. And I think NC Regional is the one that's in process right now.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
Sure, you're welcome. Any other questions? All right, so B, all provisional brokers must have all advertising that will be seen by the public approved by the BIC. Okay, that's to make sure that you are aware of the advertising rules and that you comply with them. And the BIC is responsible not just for provisional, but actually for all advertising for every agent in the firm. And that's why we have such specific advertising requirements and rules and things available for you all in this document here. But all PBs do have to have their advertising actually approved. So if you're provisional, make sure you send any ads that you're considering to the BIC email and make sure you get those approved. All sources of advertising must contain the words Keller Williams or either the KW Realty logo or the KW Central logo. So as long as there's at least a KW in the ad, then you meet that requirement so that it's not considered to be a blind ad. Okay, so commission requirements require the firm name to be in the ad. Now, we've had questions in the past about, is the hashtag sufficient? Like if you're doing an ad on social media, the hashtag is not sufficient to have KW as a part of your ad. You do have to include it in the actual ad itself. Okay, so that might be a surprise. Heather?
On that note, because the hashtag, when I first started 5 years ago, that's exactly what Robin told us to do. Was to add the hashtag. So that's good to know that that's no longer acceptable. Has that been pushed out to our office at large? Because I don't recall seeing a communication on it. And my follow-up question to that is, Robin used to be the one that would monitor for violations on that, and who might be doing that now? Because I'm starting to see there more and more kind of blind ads on Facebook or where these requirements are getting less and less, we're not following them as stringently as we should be.
Okay, so those are two good questions. I will say that this document and the policies and procedures and advertising, all of these things have been made available to the Market Center for at least the past year. They've been out there for some time, but all of the agents are not necessarily participating in the trainings or the Glad You Asked or looking at these policies and procedures. So they're here, they're available, and we're doing the best that we can to reach everyone. But I can't say for sure that a specific blast went out saying, no, you can't use hashtags or something like that. So this is what the purpose of reviewing the policies and procedures now. And we're sending out little short reminders here and there, putting some things out in the Facebook group. As far as who is monitoring that monitoring is handled loosely. I will say we have assistants that are helping in the BIC department. But I think that it's now the opportunity to really crack down on that, because if the Real Estate Commission is receiving complaints, and we've gotten a couple of emails and notices from other firms about our agents advertising, so we will certainly reach out to you for corrections if it's brought to our attention that you are advertising incorrectly. So we're working on, but it's very difficult to manage every ad for 300 agents all going in 300 different directions. And so we need to make sure that the compliance information is available to you and that you're responsible for following that. Thank you for asking. Those are great questions. Any other questions so far? All right.
Hey,
All right.
hey, Tiffany.
Oh,
Can
hey,
you-
Teresa.
Hi, and
Hey.
forgive me, I'm driving, so I'm gonna do my best here. This is really good discussion, and I just wanted to just tag on to piggyback what you just said about the ads. Remember that all of the agents are independent contractors and independent business owners, so it's kind of both of our responsibility. It's the agent's responsibility as well as the commission tasks the broker in charge with overseeing that. So I'd like to think of it as all of us are monitoring the ads. And thank you, Tiffany, for putting it in there, you know, that the information is out there. We make the information available. So it's a two-part ownership in there. The ownership of the agents, making sure their ads are in compliance, as well as it being overseen by the big department. So great questions, great discussion, and thank you, Tiffany, for discussing the do's and don'ts of advertising.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. And so it's a combined effort from all of us. And so with that being said, if you notice that some of your team members, some other agents within KW, if you have questions about their advertising, shoot us a question so that we can address it and either correct it if need be, or let you know why it is actually acceptable. And so I'm going to have a couple of examples once we get through here of some feedback that we have and some questions that we have received and why those ads are okay. So that's coming once we get through a few more of these points on advertising here. All right, so part D, internet advertising is permitted on non-IDX sites according to the following. So we've got 3 things that you can do if you choose to go to a site that is not fed by the IDX. So the first one is if you're offering your services as a buyer's agent to sell listings that you advertise on the internet, those listings must be Keller Williams listings. So you can't try to offer your services as a buyer agent using some other firm's listings. Okay, so you have to use our firm's listings if you're doing that on the internet. And you have to first obtain written permission from the listing agent to advertise or list on their behalf if you are not that listing agent or on their team. And then the third thing is the advertising must contain only the information provided on the MLS sheet. You cannot add anything to the advertising other than what the listing agent has actually released. Okay, so careful to know those things if you're trying to use that as one of your strategies to build business on the internet. E, all social media, print, MLS, etc. ads must be approved by the BIC. One of the ways that we do that, as Teresa just mentioned, is by providing what these requirements are and making sure that you know that you have to follow those. And so it's very difficult, again, for one person to monitor everybody's advertising. So your part and your duty is to follow these rules that are being provided to you. F, no financing term should be included in any advertising. We are real estate brokers. We are not lenders. Stay in your lane. And if you want to combine with a lender and let them advertise financing terms so that they can make sure that they are compliant with federal rules and laws there, then you can partner with one for advertising, but you should not include any financing terms in your advertising. Keep it about the property. All right. G, no property will be advertised. Yes.
Hey, sorry about that. That's Natalie Marone.
Hey, Natalie.
Quick question.
Sure.
I do a lot of just, congratulations to the new homeowners kinds of, they're not really ads. It's just really like, this is how my day went on social media. Is that considered I mean, what's the difference between just making a post because you exist as a human being on Facebook as a realtor, and advertising?
Okay, thank you, Natalie, for asking that. In particular, for these rules that we are covering here, they are regarding advertising properties that are listed for others. Okay, so when you're advertising a property that you have listed. Now, when you're advertising yourself, of course, we want you to conduct yourself in a professional manner, something that does not reflect negatively on the company. But if there's not a specific property involved, then you're not advertising that property. Thank you for asking and for that clarification question.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, G, no property will be advertised in any way without a signed listing agreement. So it has to be in writing, signed and written on file with the broker in charge, which means you have to actually hit the submit button in Command. We have so many agents that say it's in Command, I loaded it, but you fail to actually submit it. So until it's submitted, then the BIC does not have access to that file. Okay, so it does have to be uploaded and submitted so that you can begin your advertising. The listing agreement in the hands of the agent is not sufficient. If you want to advertise your listing, the original or a copy has to be accessible to the BIC. So if we're getting calls, if we're getting a question or a complaint and we can't access any information, we cannot answer any questions, nor can we defend any information or accusations that are being brought. Okay, we need access to that information before you start advertising. H, no price changes or other substantive changes to the listing will be advertised unless a written change of the price or other appropriate information is submitted in the command file. So if you're making some kind of change to your original listing, do not forget it has to be changed and submitted in the command file before you begin advertising something new. Otherwise, you don't have the authority, as far as we can see, to advertise that change. All right. I, advertising features as new. Okay, there's so many definitions of new. New actually just means new, right? But when it comes to advertising features as new, information on the features of the property will not be advertised as new unless it's substantiated by written receipts or other evidence of payment from the owner showing the date that the work was done. So, you know, you'll see it all the time. New paint, new flooring, new carpets. The definition of new may range from within the past year to the past 10 years, depending on who you're talking with, right? So you got to have some sort of proof of what new specifically means. And then if the verification is received, it can be advertised as new with that appropriate date. If you do not receive the verification, then you have to use a different word such as newer or recent, something that does not imply that it's brand new if you don't have proof that something is in fact new. Okay, so agents should take special care to follow these same rules when regards to using special feature sheets in your advertising. And if you do, Beth, did you have a question?
Yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but so I may have missed it, but how do you define new?
Oh, okay. So to define new is basically what we're asking you to do is to make sure that you have proof of when that work was done, like the date. So if someone had their house painted right before the listing and you say new, then there should be some sort of proof, some receipt or other work order or something that indicates that it was done just prior to the listing. If someone had a roof replaced 3 years ago, you can't really say new if it was 3 years ago, but you could say newer or you could say recent. But when it comes to new, the expectation is that it's very, very close to the time of the listing. There's not a specific definition, but I would say you would want to make sure that it's within maybe a 3-month window time frame, or actually advertise the specific date, which is even better, of when it was done, February or what have you. Okay. And so that's how we're asking you to quantify that. Heather.
So in regards to the proof, is it acceptable that the agent has copies of said invoices? I mean, you're not suggesting that we have to post those to the MLS.
It's acceptable that you have it. You don't have to
Okay.
post it. Yep. So if you're going to say new and you have such invoice, then you could just, you could say new in whatever that date was that the work was performed. Okay. All right. And so the last part of that section here is, if the agent does not follow this policy regarding any information sheets or other documentation or advertising that the agent prepares, they will be solely liable for any errors or omissions which later cause any losses. So the reason that this is so specific is because it could cause you not to be covered by E&O. And so E&O is the reason that you're required to have proof of your claim of something being new. Okay, so we like to explain the reason for. We're not just making rules up. It is for your coverage or for your protection. Okay. J, for sale signs and lockboxes will be removed immediately upon expiration, withdrawal of a listing. And so if you don't list, if you're not the listing agent anymore, you need to immediately remove your signs and your lockboxes immediately that day, not the next day, next week, or forget completely. You have to get those off. K, sold signs. Okay, so this has come up. This one's pretty long. Instead of reading this whole thing, I'm just going to give you guys the short. You as an agent are advised to only put a sold sign on the property when it has actually closed. Okay, now either agent can put the sold sign on the property, but the way it works is that only the listing agent could put it on prior to closing. And then the buyer's agent could put the sold sign on after the closing with the permission of those buyers. Okay, so there is a little bit of a window of who has the authority to put it on when. And in the case of sold signs, because the commission discourages the use of them prior to closing. So our company policy says, instead of putting sold signs and getting into this back and forth and who has the right to put it on there, we are asking you to use under contract signs instead of sold signs. That way, as soon as you're under contract, you can go ahead and have that sign the entire time until it closes. So we recommend using under contract instead of sold. All right. L, internet advertising has to contain the appropriate content and shall not have links to anything inappropriate or sponsored by any person or entity that has not specifically been approved by this company's management. Examples of inappropriate content include any kind of racial or ethnic or hate content, content that is excessively violent or sexually explicit, and any other discriminatory words or phrases. So these are not, they are not appropriate in any advertising of the firm, or nor are links to information or content such like as this. They're not appropriate as well. M, all advertising must include the following disclaimer. You all are probably very well aware of this one. Each KW office is independently owned and operated. Remember, that has to be in all advertising. And then in all advertising must also include the equal opportunity requirements from federal guidelines. And so just an idea of what that looks like, this equal opportunity house here, you can usually select it whenever you're having your, let's say you're having business cards made. They usually will have the equal opportunity logo, and that would be sufficient. But you do have to include, and they even are very specific from the federal guidelines, what size the equal opportunity logo has to be depending on the size of the advertisement. And so we just cut and paste that right in here from federal guidelines. So if you're running a half a page ad, your logo for the equal opportunity has to be a 2x2 logo as a part of that ad. And all the way down to an 1/8 of a page ad has to have a 1/2 by 1/2 inch logo. Okay, so it's very specific rules regarding the presence of that equal opportunity, equal housing opportunity logo. If you want more information about that particular guideline, we have the website here where you can go to HUD. And that is the end of our advertising review. And I want to thank you all for sticking in here and covering that, because it's really important when it comes to advertising to make sure that you are compliant with the commission's rules, but also with state and federal, the MLS rules, and all of these things that you need to know. Any questions? Any questions about advertising?
And that document is hanging where?
Okay, thank you for asking, Heather. I was just about to say, in case you don't remember everything that I just showed you, don't forget that it is in our office intranet. So if you go to the white pages or to the intranet, the policies and procedures document is there. And this is the exhibit that's attached at the very back end of the policies and procedures. Jen.
Hey, I just wanted to clarify in case it's helpful for other people, and also just to make sure that I am in compliance and understanding how it works. I remember being told in ethics or in somewhere that when we're talking about property, we need to talk about the property and not the types of people who couldn't live there, even down to saying things like short walk from, instead of saying like 2.5 miles from such and such, which is a fact of the property, being very careful not to say like quick walk from the arborate. I can't even say that word, quick walk from the grocery store.
Right. And the reason why, Jen, is because it could be considered to be discriminatory against people who can't walk. So someone with a handicap could be offended or find it discriminatory if you describe the property as in walking distance anywhere. So again, it's really important to try to stick as closely as possible to the facts. I get that you're trying to be a little flowery and you want to give people a feel for what's nearby, but you have to be cautious that some of the wording that you use could be perceived as a discriminatory advertisement from some kind of a protected class. And so you do have to be aware, and we have, every time you have a CE or something, they're talking more and more about things to look out for, because people do, and they can make complaints, and those complaints can be enforced. Okay, so it's for your protection to just be more broadly aware and not to be discriminatory. And the best way to do that is to focus on facts about the property.
So, Tiffany,
Yes.
you really wouldn't be able to say has a beautiful mountain view, because you could be discriminating against people that can't see.
Okay, Beth, so if you're taking it technically, you could say mountains are able to be seen from windows, or, you could say some things like that. But again, you just want to be aware. I haven't heard to this point that someone was complaining about using the terms of a mountain or ocean view. There are certain terms that are still considered to be acceptable. And so just an awareness and a caution to make sure that it is as non-discriminatory as possible.
Okay.
Yeah. Great questions, everyone. Anything else about advertising before we go to our last topic? Judy, did you have a question?
So I was trained, don't use adjectives like, beautiful or, gorgeous. I mean, that's so subjective that what's beautiful to me might not be beautiful to you. So sticking to the facts and not the descriptions. And I know, and everybody's getting really clever with how they do their descriptions to set themselves apart.
Right.
That said, when you start thinking about it as you're writing, you usually have a choice. So instead of saying beautiful, just come up with another way of saying, striking, or, something that is not, that somebody couldn't argue with. It's really going to be your safer bet. So
Okay.
I always just kind of chuckle when I read these really, ridiculous descriptions that people have just, thrown 20 adjectives around that, you and I may totally disagree with, but they think that they're pleasing their seller and, and being so highly complimentary. And really that's not the purpose of the remarks.
Right. Very good. And so that, thank you for sharing that with us, Judy. We do have a very limited space in the remarks. And so you would do your clients the best service by putting as much about the house as possible in those remarks, instead of trying to come up with pretty words to describe what someone can see in the pictures that hopefully you would put there, and so again, being intentional, there's really no rule saying that you can't use the adjectives or the flowery language. There's no rule or law against it, as long as you're not stepping over the edge of going into not telling a truth. So as long as it's not misrepresentation, there's really no rule against it. But what best serves your client? What is the best way to, as accurately as possible, describe the property in the small space allotted, and really focus on details about the home as much as you possibly can. All right. Never talk about people. Keep people out of it until they buy it and move in it, right? Okay. Anyway, the last topic for today is agents financing seller repairs. Okay, you guys talk to me. I see Natalie clapping her hands. What are your experience, or what do you even think about that? Have you run into agents that offer to finance seller repairs, or is that something you've done in a transaction, or would you do it, or what do you think?
Okay, can I speak? I'm Cindy.
Hi, Cindy. Sure.
Hey, I'm in the car, but I'm not driving. I'm sitting in the Chick-fil-A line. That's exciting. So yes, I have done a repair. I paid for repair and then I was paid at closing.
Okay.
So it was something that needed to be done before the house went on the market, and I had the money and I did that, and then I got reimbursed.
Okay. And that worked out well? You did get the money back? Okay.
Yeah, because it was before closing, like, I mean, not before closing. Yes, they had enough money. There was enough money for, to do the payoffs and everything. So yes.
Okay.
Now, normally would I do that? No, but in this instance, I knew they would make more money. And actually, I actually did carpet. It was over $5,000. I actually put new carpet in the house for them, and I paid for it.
All right. And that's one of the examples that I'm looking for. So Cindy, thank you for sharing that. And I'm so glad that you had a good outcome, because there is another side to making that kind of investment as well. Did you do anything specifically to protect your interest once you paid for that? You didn't?
No.
Okay.
Nope, nothing was signed. I just took care of it. And I trust people, which is not a good thing. These people ended up, I won't tell the whole story, but it was Cindy.
Thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you.
Tiffany, my experience here, at least down here in Orange County and Durham County, has been that people are partnering, realtors are partnering with the sellers, and then they're giving them an estimate for how much it will sell. Sometimes they're pouring $100,000 into the house for the seller, and then, saying, oh, it'll sell at 500 if you don't do the repairs. You'll get 800 if you do. I'll give you the 100,000. We'll split the 300,000 difference. They're doing this at a very high level. There are massive contracts that have been drawn up by attorneys. And as a realtor, I am, of course, in business and competing with people that are doing this. There's also new firms in the area that have this as their essential business model, where it's like one realtor, one contractor who's also licensed, and they go out and purposefully set out to do a co-ownership during the flip, and then, take the money and kind of split it at the end. Where my concerns come in with all of this, of course, is what if it doesn't close? Or what if the seller changes their mind?
Right. All right. Very good, Natalie. And thank you for bringing those examples. Cindy mentioned that she had done one at, about 5 or so. But what about large financing? Like if there's major work that needs to be done, how do you handle that? So we're going to kind of step through that. But before we do, I'm going to go ahead and tell you our position as your brokers in charge. We recommend that you don't do it. That's, as simple as you can get. Just don't do it, like Nike, except don't, right? So anyway, but let's talk about why. The reason that we recommend that you don't get involved in a financing capacity in your same transaction, you've got a couple of opportunities here now for conflict of interest to now arise, because you have your own monies involved in the transaction. You also, if you go outside of the standard documentation and the standard transaction, you lose your opportunity to be covered in that transaction by E&O. Okay. And so if something really major were to go wrong, or if there's a complaint later or something comes up, you're not going to be covered or protected because of that additional activity of being involved in the financing. That's not standard or traditional real estate practice. We don't have standard forms for that. Okay. Now, with that being said, it is not illegal. If it were illegal, everybody that you're talking about wouldn't be doing it, right? So it's not illegal, but you should protect yourself. If you're going to invest large amounts of cash, $100,000 into a property, you do need to protect yourself with attorney drafted documentation that specifically lays out what your expectation is. And typically that documentation does include the requirement that the seller sells. So if they change their mind later, they've already signed a legal document saying that they are going to sell it within whatever time frame is agreed upon, so that you are able to get your investment back out of the property. So if you do it, you need to do it properly and with an attorney drafted addendum that covers all of those potential mind changes or whatever else could come up to best protect your investment and opportunity to get it back out. Okay, so you definitely need to use attorney drafted addenda if you're going to invest. You definitely need to make sure to cover things like when the property has to be sold and what the interest is and how much you're going to receive after everything is repaid, if there's some sort of splitting of the profits and all those types of things. So it can get really messy. You need to make sure that it's very professionally handled, including attorney drafted documentation that's very clear. But remember, again, you will lose your opportunity to be covered by E&O insurance if you participate in any kind of financing of seller activity. And so it's a risk that you need to be aware of if you decide to offer those services. It's not unheard of. A lot of people are doing this, but they're, taking those risks, whether they realize it or not. They're taking those risks. In this market, it's a little less risky because you know that the properties are selling way over actual value even. But when things start to even out, if people jump in there with $100,000 repair and then suddenly the market freezes, you could be in a mess, And so it's really important to look at big picture, really think about if it's worth the risk or not. And just be willing to walk away if it's a bad investment. So don't invest more in it than you'd be willing to walk away from. Deb.
If you do something small, like you're the listing agent and you pay somebody to clean the house, like say like $400 to clean the house, and then the seller is going to reimburse you for that, the next week before it closes. Are you in danger of losing your E&O then?
Okay, that's a fair question. So typically the E&O danger is if there is some sort of investment in the property that will potentially come back to you, maybe paid out of the closing or something to that effect. If you're just hiring and arranging and paying for the inspector and they're going to pay you right back, that typically doesn't fall under the danger zone there. And I've heard of agents doing that. But again, if you're going to do that, be prepared to eat that cost if the seller changes their mind, or if the money that they thought they were getting didn't come through. So you still want to be a little bit wary. And I personally recommend that you just keep your finances separate from your clients and transaction. Maybe refer them to service providers that would accept their payment at the closing instead, or something to that effect. Natalie.
Tiffany, I remember somewhere in my awesome Keller Williams continuing education that I'm not supposed to handle any money except DD and EM. That is a commission rule, was my understanding. Is that not true?
Well, when it comes to handling monies, you can courier different types of money. So like if, let's say that the seller gave you a check to pay the home inspector because they're not going to be able to attend or something like that, you can courier funds that are not EM or DD. But again, you have to safeguard any property that you're handling. So you're required to safeguard if you are the courier. So until you get it from A to B, you just have to be careful that you are properly handling whatever property, including a check or what have you from your client.
But in the case of what Beth is asking, she's actually paying for a service that they're going to pay you back for. You're allowed to do that if you're comfortable with the seller?
There's not a commission rule that says that you can't.
Huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Good question.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? So as your broker in charge, I see, is that you, Pete? You're on mute, so you're gonna have to unmute it. You don't know how to unmute? If you can't unmute it, maybe you can type it in the chat. Call Beth, tell her to come unmute it for you. Yeah, you're still on mute, so we can't hear you. If you look on the bottom, if you're scrolling at the bottom left-hand side.
I'm here now.
Okay, there you go. Okay, good.
Mine's on the bottom. Hers is somewhere else.
Okay.
Okay, I am mad. I just tried to schedule a showing for a property in Burlington, for a property listed only by a Triangle agent, and Triangle has given showing time the instruction that if you're not an agent in Triangle, you cannot show one of their listings.
Oh my God.
Okay.
And
that's awful.
I got around it by Beth. It's in Beth's name, so we did it that way. But if I'm a new agent in Burlington and I want to show a house in Burlington and Triangle, and they're not in Triangle because they're just starting out and they can't show a $100,000 house in Burlington as a Burlington agent, and I'm licensed to sell all over North Carolina and showing time won't let me, I think the local MLS should do a reciprocity and say no Triangle agent can show anything listed in Alamance unless they're an Alamance agent.
Oh, well, so Pete, let me tell you, it could be a new agent having,
what's the property? I want to look them up.
Trying to follow all the rules, and maybe they're being too restrictive in their showing instructions. It's not a rule, just Triangle as a whole. So that had to be.
He said the showing time agent said he was instructed by Triangle MLS.
Triangle MLS.
Not to allow
That's
An
impossible.
agent- An agent not in triangle to show a house that's listed in triangle.
That's
Okay.
impossible. We do it all the time.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look into that, Pete. I'm thinking maybe they misspoke. It might be a new showing time person that's scheduling or something. Because I'm not aware at all of Triangle having any kind of rule that would prevent agents from other MLSs from showing the properties. I'm not aware of any such restriction. I'm a member of Triangle. But I do know that individual agents or firms could set such a restriction, but not the Triangle MLS as a whole. So I will, because you brought that up and you think that it is, I will double check. I'll check on
Okay,
that.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
We have the address.
1710 Wood Avenue.
But it's still a situation where you're gonna have to get the agreement for compensation
Yes.
signed first by that listing agent before you show it.
Right. But they still should be able to show it. So if,
Get an appointment.
right.
Pete, I've had the same thing happen to me. I always have to call the agent to get permission.
Yeah. And so
See,
it
I
could-
think, but see, I think the MLS cannot restrict stuff that way.
yeah, I really don't think, Pete, that it's the MLS. I think it is the individual agent. And
Okay.
so, like I said, I'll double check on that for you and make sure that that is not in fact a Triangle MLS restriction, because I'm
It
not
is
aware of
off- it-
anything.
It is OfferPad, and as Sarah says, and they are a pain in the tail.
Oh, OfferPad. Oh my goodness.
Ugh.
And all of the similar iBuyers, they can be a little bit difficult. So yeah, I doubt it, Pete. I really doubt that it's Triangle MLS restriction, but I will double check and verify that
thank you.
with you. Yeah, you're welcome.
And thank you for reminding me, Heather, that I've got to get a compensation deal
Agreement.
agreement.
And do that before bringing any offers. All right.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. And so before we go, just a quick reminder, because there's a lot more of you here now. Don't forget, if you haven't already, take your CE season. Make sure you take a Gen Up or a Bic Up, depending on what your status is, and an elective by the end of May. That's our firm's deadline to make sure everybody makes it on June 10th. All right. Any other situations? Anything else happening in your transactions? We've got 2 more minutes.
Just not clear on the recent kind of change to the class action lawsuit against the buyer's agents being compensated by the sellers.
I don't have an update on that. I haven't heard
I mean, I
any.
just know there was like a recent judgment, but I don't understand what in the world is happening, but I know that it's happening.
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
I don't have an update on that, so that's something I can look into before the next one for you.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for asking. So the judgment about the class action suit on sellers paying buyer agents.
Yeah. I had put it in the Facebook page too.
It's in Seattle, right? Is that the one, Seattle, Washington, or Kansas?
No, it's in Missouri, Kansas, Illinois, and
Yeah.
Texas, maybe. But I know that there are people talking about it in North Carolina as well. And I just feel like I'd just like to understand it. Like, what is going on?
So my take, I put my blinders on and I'm just working, because there's only so much we can do. And if you start doing the outside noise, now this is me, Cindy Dudley. You start listening to the outside noise, it gets you very worried and fearful. So to me, until we know, we should do our business the way we know how to do our business. That's all I'm going to say.
It's above our pay grade. I
Yeah.
agree with Cindy.
Above your pay grade.
I mean,
I'll tell
it's
you,
political.
North Carolina is historically a little bit, we're not the kind of state that just jumps on the bandwagon type of state, so they, even if they do make some change, it will be slow, intentional, gradual, informed, that kind of thing.
I think that might have been Natalie's question, was to understand the if there have been any changes or implications or anything passed down from Keller Williams in regards to that particular settlement. And I agree with what I'm hearing from, what you're saying, what Cindy's saying, that until North Carolina is specifically addressed, it doesn't, we're not impacted by those changes. But I think that's maybe what she was looking for, was to say, okay, there's been a settlement. What does that mean for us at this moment?
Yeah, so we haven't received any kind of instruction or direction from KWRI concerning that, that I'm aware of. If so, it hasn't trickled down yet. And then certainly the commission has not yet made any kind of ruling or judgment there. Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
I also want it noted that Teresa put you on the firing line by yourself again today. So.
Well, she was here earlier, Pete. She was in transit in the car on her way to an appointment. So she was here a little earlier. She chimed in for us, but yeah, sometimes she was by herself last week, right? Or last time. Sometimes we have to do it. We're gonna make it. Thank you all for being here. And as always, we are glad you asked. Hope to see you in 2 weeks. We'll be working on some good stuff for you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much, Tiffany.
You're welcome. Thanks. Bye.